The Galactic Council chamber hummed with the low-frequency conversations of 12 different species. Ambassador Zethkar of the Velkari adjusted his environmental suit and watched the massive holographic display that dominated the center of the room. The humans had been members of the Council for exactly 47 standard cycles, and in that time they had proven to be remarkably unremarkable. The motion to discuss the human colony request for Kepler 442b is now open, announced Council Speaker Yithara, her crystalline voice echoing through the chamber's translation matrix. The ethereal delegate always maintained perfect neutrality, which made her an ideal mediator for interspecies politics. Zethkar observed the human representative, Ambassador Sarah Chen, as she stood to address the council. The humans were such peculiar creatures. They had no natural armor like the Krillian exoskeletons, no telepathic abilities like the Mindari, and no technological integration like his own Velkari people. Their ships were adequate but not impressive. Their weapons were functional but not feared. Their diplomacy was earnest but not particularly cunning. Honored council members, Chen began, her voice carrying the slight accent that marked her as originating from the human territory called North America. We formally request permission to establish a research colony on Kepler 442b. The planet shows promising signs for agricultural development and could serve as a vital food production center for our growing population. The request was routine. Humans seemed to always be hungry, always expanding, always needing more space and resources. It was a trait they shared with several other species, though they approached it with less sophistication than most. The planet in question, interjected Councillor Vexiran of the Hegemony, lies within the neutral buffer zone between our territory and the Savage sector. Are the humans prepared for the risks associated with that region? Chen nodded confidently. We understand the dangers, Counselor. Our surveys indicate the planet is currently uninhabited, and our colony ships are equipped with standard defensive systems. Zethkar suppressed what his people would call amusement, standard defensive systems. The humans had no idea what lurked in the Savage sector. The name itself had been chosen specifically to warn off curious species. For 300 cycles, no civilization had successfully maintained a presence near those boundaries. Perhaps, suggested Councillor Thrimbath of the Collective, his insectoid mandibles clicking thoughtfully, we should inform our human colleagues about the Devourers. The chamber fell silent. Even mentioning the Devourers was considered an act of poor judgment by most civilized species. Better to let sleeping horrors remain undisturbed. Chen's expression didn't change, but Zethkar noticed her posture shift slightly. Humans had remarkable body language, far more expressive than most species realized. We're not familiar with this term, Counselor. Could you elaborate? Yithara's form shimmered with what the ethereals called reluctance. The entities known as Devourers are problematic. They appear to be a nomadic species that consumes everything in their path: planets, ships, space stations, even asteroids with useful minerals. They leave nothing behind except empty space. How many planets have they consumed? Chen asked. 47 confirmed worlds, replied Vexiran. Possibly more that we never discovered. They move in massive hive ships, each one the size of a small moon. Our best military analysts estimate their individual ships carry between 50,000 and 100,000 entities. Chen made a note on her datapad. Have there been any successful defensive actions against them? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Zethkar watched as several council members exchanged glances. The truth was embarrassing for the entire galactic community. Despite their advanced technologies, despite their centuries of military development, despite their vast fleets, no species had ever successfully defeated the Devourers in direct combat. There have been strategic withdrawals, Thrimbath admitted. Evacuation protocols have saved many lives. I see. Chen's tone remained neutral, but something in her eyes had changed. Zethkar had spent enough time studying human expressions to recognize when they were processing information in ways that differed from other species. Humans had a peculiar habit of not immediately showing their true thoughts. The Devourers follow predictable patterns, explained Counselor Zaraquan of the Maritime Union. They consume everything in a system, then move to the next nearest source of resources. Based on their last confirmed position, they are approximately 2 cycles away from the Kepler 442 system. That gives us time to establish defenses, Chen said. The statement caused what humans would call a stir in the chamber. Several delegates began speaking at once, their various languages creating a cacophony of concern. Ambassador Chen, Yathara called for order. Perhaps you misunderstand the situation. The appropriate response to devourer proximity is evacuation, not defense. With respect, Speaker Yathara, evacuation is one option. However, Kepler 442b represents significant strategic value for human food production. We would prefer to explore defensive alternatives. Zethkar felt something he hadn't experienced in many cycles. Curiosity. The humans were either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Given their track record, he suspected the latter. What defensive capabilities do humans possess that the rest of us lack? Asked Vexiron, his tone carrying what the hegemony species considered polite skepticism. Chen smiled, and Zethkar noticed it wasn't the diplomatic smile she usually wore during council sessions. This expression was different, sharper somehow. Counselor Vexiron, I believe there may be some fundamental differences in how our species approach threats. With the Council's permission, I would like to present our defensive proposal. Yathara gestured approval, and the chamber's central holodisplay shifted to show Chen's presentation. The first image showed the Kepler 442 system, with proposed human settlements marked on the habitable planet. Our plan involves establishing not just a colony, but a comprehensive monitoring network throughout the system. Early warning satellites, communication relays, and rapid response stations positioned at strategic points. The display showed a web of installations spreading throughout the system. It was more extensive than most species would consider necessary for a simple agricultural colony. The humans appear to be militarizing the system, observed Thrimbath. We prefer to think of it as comprehensive preparation, Chen replied. Our species has a saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. We've learned that proper preparation can make the difference between survival and extinction. Zethkar studied the proposal more carefully. The human plan was actually quite sophisticated, though it relied heavily on what appeared to be surveillance technology. Humans seemed obsessed with gathering information about their environment. Even with advance warning, pointed out Counselor Mordesh of the Silicon Confederacy, you cannot fight the Devourers with conventional weapons. Their bio-armor is impervious to energy weapons, and their regenerative abilities make physical damage temporary at best. We appreciate that information, Counselor, Chen said. However, we believe successful defense relies less on superior firepower and more on understanding your enemy's behavior patterns. She gestured, and the display changed to show what appeared to be a complex behavioral analysis chart. Lines and curves mapped movement patterns, feeding cycles, and communication frequencies. Our xenobiologists have been studying the available data on devourer encounters. We've identified several interesting patterns that suggest these entities, despite their destructive capability, follow predictable biological imperatives. The chamber was unusually quiet. Most council members had never seen anyone present the Devourers as a subject for scientific study rather than a force of nature to be avoided. For instance, Chen continued, Devourers always consume resources in a specific order. First, they harvest atmospheric gases. Second, they mine planetary surfaces for heavy metals. Third, they consume biological matter. This sequence never varies. "How does knowing this help?" asked Zaraquan. "Because predictable behavior can be influenced," Chen replied. "Our plan involves using their own behavioral patterns against them." The display now showed a detailed tactical overview. Zethkar found himself leaning forward despite his usual diplomatic composure. The human plan was unlike anything he had seen before. Instead of trying to match the Devourer's strength, it seemed designed to exploit their weaknesses. "We propose to establish decoy resource concentrations at predetermined locations throughout the system. When the Devourers arrive, they will follow their standard consumption pattern, moving from location to location in a predictable sequence." "And then?" prompted Yathara. Chen's smile became more pronounced. "And then we hunt them." The word sent a ripple of confusion through the chamber. Most species didn't have a direct translation for the concept of hunting as humans understood it. To most civilized species, food acquisition was a matter of agriculture, synthesis, or trade agreements. The idea of actively pursuing and killing other living creatures for resources was considered primitive. "I'm not familiar with this term in this context," admitted Vexiran. "Hunting is the practice of pursuing, capturing, and killing wild animals for food, sport, or survival," Chen explained. "It was how our species acquired protein before we developed agriculture. The skills and instincts involved don't disappear just because we've advanced technologically." Zethkar accessed his species' database on human history and felt something approaching shock. Humans had been apex predators on their home world. They had literally hunted other species to extinction. Their entire evolutionary development was built around being efficient killers. "You're proposing to hunt the Devourers?" Thrimbath's mandibles clicked rapidly, indicating severe agitation. "These are not prey animals, Ambassador. They are the most dangerous entities in known space. With respect, Counselor, everything is prey to something else. It's just a matter of understanding the right approach." Chen gestured again, and the display showed a detailed breakdown of human military equipment. Zethkar realized he had been completely wrong about human capabilities. Their weapons weren't less advanced than other species' technology. They were designed for completely different purposes. Where most species had developed energy weapons for precision and efficiency, humans had created projectile weapons designed for maximum tissue damage. Where others had built shields for protection, humans had developed armor designed for mobility and concealment. Where others had created ships for exploration and trade, humans had built vessels that could function as mobile hunting platforms. "Our ships are equipped with something other species don't typically use: stealth technology. We can track Devourer movements without being detected. We can observe their behavior patterns in real time. We can identify individual entities and their specific roles within their social structure." The implications began to dawn on Zethkar. Humans weren't planning to fight the Devourers in traditional combat. They were planning to study them, track them, and eliminate them using tactics developed over millions of years of evolutionary predatory behavior. "The key to successful hunting," Chen continued, "is patience, planning, and understanding your prey's weaknesses. Devourers may be powerful, but they're still biological entities. They have needs, instincts, and vulnerabilities." She paused, looking around the chamber. "We just need to find the right pressure points." The session was adjourned for private deliberations, but Zethkar found himself unable to concentrate on anything except the human presentation. For the first time since humans had joined the Council, he was beginning to understand what made them different from other species. They weren't just another civilization that had developed space travel. They were predators who had learned to build starships. As he returned to his quarters, Zethkar activated his personal communication array and sent a priority message to the Velkari Intelligence Division. If the humans were serious about their hunting plan, the next few cycles were going to be very interesting indeed. The Council would be watching, and for the first time in 300 cycles, someone was going hunting in the Savage sector. 2 cycles later, Zethkar found himself in the Council's emergency observation chamber, staring at real-time feeds from the Kepler 442 system. The humans had been true to their word. In just 24 months, they had transformed an empty system into what could only be described as an elaborate trap. "Fascinating," murmured Counselor Thrimbath, his compound eyes reflecting the light from dozens of monitoring screens. "The humans have exceeded all construction projections." The main display showed the Kepler 442 system in remarkable detail. The human colony on the planet's surface was smaller than expected, but the orbital infrastructure was staggering. Hundreds of satellites, monitoring stations, and communication relays formed an invisible web throughout the system. Most impressive were the resource depots placed at strategic locations, exactly as Ambassador Chen had promised. "They've created artificial asteroid fields," observed Counselor Vexiran. "Those metal concentrations would be irresistible to any resource-gathering species." Zethkar was studying the human ship positions. Unlike most species who would concentrate their fleet for maximum firepower, the humans had scattered their vessels throughout the system. Each ship was positioned near what appeared to be empty space, but Zethkar's enhanced sensors detected the subtle energy signatures of cloaked installations. "Speaker Yathara," called Counselor Zara Kwan from her monitoring station, "we're detecting gravitational disturbances at the system's edge. Something massive is approaching." The chamber fell silent except for the hum of electronic equipment. On the central display, space itself seemed to ripple and distort. Then, emerging from hyperspace like a nightmare made manifest, the first Devourer hive ship appeared. Zethkar had seen images of Devourer vessels before, but experiencing one in real time was different. The ship was enormous, easily 50 kilometers in length, its surface covered in what looked like organic armor plating. Smaller vessels, each the size of a frigate, detached from the main hull and began spreading throughout the system. "Standard Devourer scouting pattern," confirmed Mordesh. "They're mapping available resources before beginning consumption." More hive ships emerged. 3, then 5, then 7 massive vessels, each one capable of consuming an entire planet. Their scout ships moved with purpose, following exactly the behavioral patterns Chen had described. "The humans are maintaining communication silence," reported Thrimbath. "No response to Devourer presence." "Because they're hunting," Zethkar said quietly. On the displays, the Devourer scouts began their resource survey exactly as predicted. They moved first to the atmospheric processors the humans had placed in orbit around several gas giants, then to the artificial asteroid fields loaded with heavy metals. The pattern was precisely what Chen had described. "Remarkable," whispered Yathara. The human behavioral analysis was completely accurate. That's when Zethkar noticed something that made his breathing apparatus flutter with what his people called anticipation. The human ships weren't responding to the Devourer presence, but they were moving, slowly, carefully, maintaining their cloaked status while repositioning throughout the system. "They're hurting them," he realized. "What?" Vexiran looked up from his tactical display. "Look at the scout ship movements. The Devourers think they're following their own instincts, but the humans have positioned the resource concentrations to create a specific path. They're being guided exactly where the humans want them." The observation was correct. As the Devourer scouts moved from resource cache to resource cache, they were unconsciously following a route that led them deeper into the system and farther from their main hive ships. More importantly, they were being separated into smaller groups. "This is unprecedented," Thrimbath clicked his mandibles nervously. No species has ever attempted to manipulate devourer behavior. On the main display, the first human action became visible. A single scout ship, isolated while investigating a particularly rich mineral deposit, suddenly found itself surrounded. The humans hadn't attacked, they had simply decloaked their ships in a perfect sphere around the alien vessel. "Communications intercept," announced Zaraquan. "The humans are broadcasting." Ambassador Chen's voice filled the chamber, transmitted from her command ship somewhere in the system. "Devourer vessel, you are surrounded. Shut down your engines and prepare to be boarded." The response was immediate and violent. The Devourer scout ship launched itself toward the nearest human vessel, bioweapon systems charging with deadly energy. That's when the humans demonstrated why they had been apex predators on their home world. The attack never connected. As the Devourer scout accelerated, the human ships moved in perfect coordination. They weren't trying to match the alien's speed, they were predicting where it would be. The scout found itself flying directly into a web of projectile fire from weapons that seemed designed specifically for this purpose. "Kinetic projectiles," observed Mordesh. "They're using solid ammunition instead of energy weapons." The effect was devastating. The Devourer's bio-armor, which had proven impervious to energy-based attacks for centuries, was being torn apart by high-velocity metal projectiles. Worse, the humans seemed to know exactly where to aim. Their shots targeted joints in the armor plating, sensor clusters, and what appeared to be vital organ chambers. "How did they know where to shoot?" asked Vexiran. Zethkar was studying the tactical display more carefully. "They've been watching. Look at the reconnaissance data they must have gathered during those 2 cycles of preparation. They know Devourer anatomy better than the Devourers do." The first scout ship was disabled within minutes, its biosystems failing as human boarding parties attached to its hull. But the humans weren't finished. While medical teams worked to keep the captured Devourer alive for study, the hunting pack was already moving toward their next target. "They captured one alive?" Thrimbath's voice carried a mixture of admiration and horror. "No one has ever taken a Devourer prisoner." The pattern repeated throughout the system. Human ships, moving with the coordination of pack hunters, isolated individual scout vessels and disabled them with surgical precision. But Zethkar noticed something else. The humans weren't killing unless necessary. They were capturing specimens for study. "Attention, Council observers," Chen's voice came through the communications array again. "We're transmitting detailed biological scans of captured Devourer entities. Please note the neural pathway structures in the brain casing. We believe we've identified their command and control mechanisms." The data streams were incredible. In just a few hours, the humans had gathered more information about Devourer physiology than the galactic community had accumulated in 3 centuries. "The main hive ships are responding," announced Zaraquan. "They're moving to defend their scouts." This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. 7 massive hive ships, each capable of destroying a planet, accelerated toward the inner system where the humans waited. "The humans should retreat now," Vexiran said. "They've accomplished more than anyone thought possible, but they can't fight the entire hive." But the humans made no move to withdraw. Instead, their ships began broadcasting on frequencies that caused the captured Devourer scouts to respond with obvious distress signals. "They're using the prisoners as bait," Zethkar realized. "They're drawing the hive ships to specific locations." The main Devourer force approached the human positions with the confidence of apex predators who had never encountered effective resistance. They moved in formation, prepared to overwhelm the humans with superior numbers and firepower. The humans waited until the hive ships were exactly where they wanted them. What happened next redefined Zethkar's understanding of tactical warfare. The humans had spent 2 cycles preparing the system, but not just with monitoring equipment and resource caches. They had been building weapons, massive kinetic projectiles, each one the size of a small asteroid, began accelerating from hidden positions throughout the system. They weren't energy weapons that could be absorbed or deflected. They were solid matter moving at significant fractions of light speed, guided by the most sophisticated targeting systems Zeth-Kar had ever seen. "Impossible," whispered Mordesh. "The energy requirements for those projectiles." "They've been building momentum for months," Chen's voice explained, as if she could hear the Council's conversation. "Solar collectors and gravitational slings, using the system's own star to power our weapons. We've had 2 cycles to prepare for this moment." The first projectile struck the lead hive ship with the force of a small nuclear explosion. The organic armor that had resisted energy weapons for centuries cracked and shattered under the kinetic impact. More importantly, the humans had aimed for specific locations based on their anatomical studies of the captured scouts. "They're targeting nerve clusters," Thrimbath observed with growing amazement. "They know where the Devourer ships are most vulnerable." The battle became a demonstration of human hunting methodology. Each projectile strike was followed by precisely coordinated attacks from human ships using the same solid ammunition that had proven effective against the scouts. The humans moved like pack hunters, focusing their attacks on individual hive ships, using their superior mobility to avoid retaliation. But the most impressive aspect was their use of the captured scouts. The humans had learned to interpret Devourer biochemical communications, and they were using their prisoners to broadcast false information to the hive ships. Coordination between the massive vessels broke down as they received conflicting orders and status reports. "They're jamming the Devourer command structure," Zeth-Kar said in amazement. "They're using the enemy's own communication system against them." Within 4 hours, 3 hive ships had been disabled or destroyed. The remaining 4 were attempting to retreat, but the humans had anticipated this as well. More kinetic projectiles, launched hours earlier, intercepted the fleeing vessels at the system's edge. "No survivors escaping to spread tactical information," Chen announced. "The Devourer threat to this system has been neutralized." The council chamber was completely silent. On the displays, human ships were already beginning recovery operations, securing disabled Devourer vessels and rescuing any survivors for study. Medical teams were working to keep captured entities alive, while science teams began detailed examinations of Devourer technology. "In approximately 6 hours," Chen continued, "we'll begin transmitting complete technical specifications for anti-Devourer weapons to all Council species. We're also prepared to share our behavioral analysis data and biological studies." Yathara was the first to speak. "Ambassador Chen, the Council is grateful for your successful defense. However, we must ask, how did your species develop such effective tactics so quickly?" Chen's response came after a brief pause. "Speaker Yathara, with respect, these aren't new tactics. This is how humans have always approached dangerous predators. We study them, we understand their behavior, and then we hunt them more effectively than they can hunt us. The technology is new, but the methodology is millions of years old." Zeth-Kar felt something he had never experienced before, a combination of profound respect and deep unease. The humans hadn't just defeated the Devourers, they had completely dismantled them using principles that were apparently fundamental to human nature. "Will your species be sharing these hunting techniques with the Council?" asked Vexeron. "Of course," Chen replied. "But we should point out that our methods require certain philosophical adjustments. Most species approach threats defensively. Humans prefer proactive solutions." The transmission ended, leaving the Council members to contemplate what they had witnessed. Zeth-Kar looked around the chamber and saw the same realization dawning on every face. They had dramatically underestimated their newest Council members. The humans weren't just another spacefaring species. They were apex predators who had learned to build starships, and they had just demonstrated that the galaxy's most feared threat was simply another form of prey. For the first time in 300 cycles, the Savage Sector was truly safe, and it had taken the humans exactly 6 hours to make it so. 3 weeks after the battle at Kepler 442, Zethkar stood in his Species Intelligence Analysis Center, reviewing reports that had fundamentally changed his understanding of galactic politics. The data streaming in from human-controlled space was staggering in both volume and implications. "Sir," his aide, junior analyst Keth Mora, approached with another stack of decoded transmissions. "The humans have eliminated 4 more Devourer clusters in the past 10 standard cycles. They're not even asking for council approval anymore." Zethkar examined the tactical reports. Each engagement followed the same pattern the council had witnessed in real time. Careful preparation, behavioral analysis, precise targeting, and complete victory. The humans had apparently decided that the Devourer threat needed to be eliminated entirely, and they were systematically hunting down every cluster in known space. "Have they suffered any casualties?" he asked. "Minimal, sir. Their hunting tactics seem to be incredibly efficient. They're capturing more Devourers alive than they're killing, and their medical teams have become expert at treating Devourer physiology. That was perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the entire situation. Not only were humans effectively destroying the galaxy's most feared predators, they were studying them with scientific thoroughness that bordered on obsession. Intelligence reports suggested human researchers now understood Devourer biology better than the creatures understood themselves." "Sir?" Kethamora hesitated. "There's something else. The humans have been making contact with isolated systems in the Savage Sector. Colonies that had been cut off for generations are suddenly receiving aid shipments and technology transfers." Zethkar felt his species equivalent of a cold chill. Humans weren't just eliminating the Devourer threat. They were actively expanding their influence into regions of space that other species had written off as lost. They were moving into territory that had been abandoned for fear of the very creatures they were now hunting to extinction. "Prepare a full briefing for the Council," he ordered. "I believe we need to discuss the implications of human expansion." The emergency council session convened 2 days later. The chamber was fuller than Zethkar had seen it in years, with senior military advisors and intelligence officials accompanying most delegations. Word of human capabilities had spread quickly through diplomatic channels. "The purpose of this session," announced Speaker Yathara, "is to address the changing strategic balance resulting from recent human military actions." Ambassador Chen appeared to be the only person in the chamber who wasn't tense. She sat calmly at the human delegation table, occasionally reviewing notes on her data pad, looking like someone attending a routine administrative meeting rather than a session that would determine her species' future role in galactic politics. "Ambassador Chen," began Councillor Vexiran, "the hegemony acknowledges the impressive success of human anti-devourer operations. However, we must address concerns about the pace and scope of human military expansion." Chen looked up from her data pad with what Zethkar was beginning to recognize as genuine surprise. "Expansion, Counselor. We're conducting cleanup operations in regions that have been abandoned by galactic civilization. I wouldn't characterize rescue missions as expansion." "Rescue missions?" Thrimbath's mandibles clicked rapidly. "You've eliminated 17 Devourer clusters and established permanent installations in 43 systems. That represents more territorial acquisition than most species achieve in centuries." "With respect, Counselor, we're not acquiring territory. We're making it safe for everyone to use. Every system we clear of Devourers is open to all Council species. We're not claiming exclusive rights to anything." Zethkar studied the human ambassador's expression carefully. She appeared to be telling the truth, which was somehow more disturbing than if she had been lying about territorial ambitions. The humans seemed to view the systematic elimination of galactic threats as a normal activity that didn't require special justification. The concern, explained Counselor Zara Kwan, is that human military capabilities appear to far exceed what was disclosed during your council admission process. Chen tilted her head slightly, a human gesture that indicated confusion. We never concealed our capabilities, Counselor. We simply hadn't encountered threats that required their full application. The council species had already achieved peaceful coexistence. There was no need to discuss hunting techniques. Hunting techniques, repeated Mordash slowly. Ambassador, what you've demonstrated isn't hunting. It's the most sophisticated military campaign in recorded galactic history. From your perspective, perhaps, Chen acknowledged. But for humans, this is simply how we approach dangerous predators. We study their behavior, understand their weaknesses, and then remove the threat permanently. The scale is larger than what we dealt with on Earth. But the methodology is identical. Yathara's crystalline form shifted to display what the ethereals considered deep thought. Ambassador Chen, are you suggesting that humans view the devourer elimination as a normal defensive response? Yes, Speaker, though we prefer to think of it as threat management rather than defense. Defense implies waiting for an attack. We prefer to identify and eliminate threats before they can cause harm. The implications of that statement settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. Zethkar realized that humans didn't just have superior military capabilities, they had a fundamentally different approach to security. Where other species responded to threats, humans anticipated and eliminated them. How many other threat species has humanity identified? Asked Vexiron quietly. Chen consulted her datapad. Our xenobiology teams have completed preliminary threat assessments for approximately 2,000 species in Council space and surrounding regions. Most pose no danger to developed civilizations. However, we've identified 43 species that demonstrate aggressive expansion patterns, and we're monitoring their activities. 43 species? Thrimbath's voice carried what his people considered shock. Are you planning to eliminate them as well? Only if they prove to be genuine threats, Chen replied matter-of-factly. Most can probably be managed through diplomatic intervention or habitat modification. We prefer non-lethal solutions when possible. Zethkar felt something approaching terror. Humans had apparently been analyzing every species in known space, categorizing them according to threat potential, and developing management strategies. They weren't just militarily superior. They were thinking about galactic security on a scale that no other species had conceived. Ambassador, Yathara's voice carried careful neutrality, what does humanity consider an acceptable level of galactic threat? Chen smiled, and once again Zethkar noticed it wasn't her diplomatic expression. Speaker, our goal is simple. We want our children to be safe. We want council species to be safe. We want civilized space to be a place where people can build families and pursue happiness without fear of being consumed by hostile entities. She paused, looking around the chamber. To achieve that goal, we're prepared to hunt down and eliminate any species that poses a genuine threat to civilized life. We don't consider this aggressive. We consider it responsible. The chamber was completely silent. Zethkar realized that every species in the council was simultaneously grappling with the same revelation. Humans weren't just another member species. They were apex predators who had appointed themselves protectors of galactic civilization. What assurances can humanity provide? Asked Zara Kwan carefully. That council species won't be considered threats? Chen's expression became genuinely warm. Counselor, council species are our allies. You're the civilizations we're protecting. The threat assessments I mentioned were specifically designed to identify species that pose dangers to council members. But who determines what constitutes a threat? Pressed Vexiran. We do, Chen replied simply. Based on objective behavioral analysis, expansion patterns, resource consumption rates, and aggression indicators, It's the same methodology we use to analyze the Devourers. Mordesh leaned forward. And if a council species disagreed with human threat assessments? Then we would discuss it, Chen said. We're not interested in acting unilaterally unless there's imminent danger. We prefer cooperation and consensus when time permits. Zethkar noted the qualification. When time permits, humans were offering to consult with council species, but they were reserving the right to act independently if they perceived immediate threats. Ambassador Chen, Yathara addressed her directly. Are you saying that humanity now considers itself responsible for galactic security? Chen paused, as if the question required careful thought. Speaker, we consider ourselves responsible for our own security and the security of our allies. If that means galactic security, then yes. The session was adjourned for private consultations, but Zethkar knew the real discussion would happen in secure communication channels over the following days. Every species would be analyzing the same question. How do you maintain independence when another species has both the capability and the inclination to eliminate any threat they identify? Over the next week, intelligence reports continued to stream in. Human ships were appearing throughout the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as something potentially more significant, guardians. They were establishing monitoring stations in critical systems, negotiating mutual defense agreements with isolated colonies, and building what could only be described as a galactic security network. Sir, Kethamora reported during one of their daily briefings, human diplomatic teams have approached 17 different species about joining their threat management consortium. They're offering advanced defensive technologies and guaranteed protection from hostile entities. What are they asking in return? Intelligence sharing and cooperation with their monitoring networks. They want real-time data about population movements, resource consumption patterns, and technological developments throughout member territories. Zethkar understood the implications immediately. Humans were building the galaxy's first truly comprehensive early warning system. They would know about potential threats long before those threats became dangerous, and they had demonstrated they possessed the capability to eliminate problems permanently. Sir, there's one more thing, Kethamora hesitated. The Velkari High Command has received a formal invitation to join the human consortium. They're requesting a response within 10 standard cycles. The decision, when it came, surprised no one who had been paying attention to human capabilities. Within 6 months of the Kepler 442 demonstration, 46 species had joined the Human Threat Management Consortium. The few who declined found themselves increasingly isolated as trade routes were secured, dangerous regions were pacified, and galactic civilization expanded into areas that had been considered permanently lost. The formal ceremony took place in the council chamber, with Ambassador Chen accepting the role of Director of Galactic Security on behalf of the human species. The position had been created specifically for her, recognizing that humans had already assumed the responsibilities whether the council acknowledged it or not. In accepting this role, Chen said during her installation speech, humanity commits to protecting all peaceful civilizations from hostile entities. We will continue to monitor galactic threats, share our findings with council members, and respond to dangers with appropriate force. She paused, looking around the chamber with that sharp smile Zethkar had learned to recognize. To any species considering aggressive actions against council members, we offer this simple advice: don't. Later, as the ceremony concluded and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Zethkar approached the human delegation table. Chen was organizing her papers, looking satisfied with the day's proceedings. Ambassador, he said, or should I say Director, I have a question. Of course, Counselor Zethkar. The day humans joined the council, did you know this would happen? Chen considered the question seriously. No. We didn't know the Devourers existed, so we couldn't have predicted this specific situation. But did we know that we would protect our allies from serious threats? Yes, that's what we do. She gathered her papers and stood to leave. Counselor, humans have been protecting others for our entire evolutionary history. We protected our families, our tribes, our nations, and our planet. Protecting our allies was always going to be our natural response to galactic threats. As she walked away, Zethkar realized that the Council had fundamentally misunderstood what they were approving when they accepted human membership. They had thought they were admitting another civilized species to their peaceful alliance. Instead, they had adopted apex predators who were incapable of allowing threats to exist in their territory. And as intelligence reports continued to flow in about human operations throughout the galaxy, Zethkar found himself grateful that humanity considered Council species allies rather than prey. Because after witnessing their hunting capabilities in real time, he understood that the distinction made all the difference in the universe.